Debunking Israeli Myths. Dr. Mohammed Asif, Associate Professor of English, CUF. Debunking Israeli Myths. In light of the barbaric Zionist aggression against the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, genocide and ethnic cleansing, there is an urgent need to counter the Zionist propaganda, that is, repeated endlessly in the media, enforced by the military, accepted without question by the world's governments, says Israeli Elon Papp's 2017, 10 Myths About Israel. Most of the world's understanding of Palestine's history is distorted, largely because of the Israeli narrative. Historical disinformation, says Papp, even of the most recent past, can do tremendous harm. What he calls willful misunderstanding of history can and does promote oppression and protect a regime of colonization and occupation. It is not surprising, therefore, that policies of disinformation continue to the present and play an important part in perpetuating the conflict. Myth Pound 1. Palestine was an empty land. That's what the Zionists said. A land without a people, for a people without a land, was the claim. And yet Palestine has been inhabited by the Palestinians for centuries. Palestine was a Roman province, and during the Ottoman period from 1517 to 1917, Israeli claim debuted. 16th century Palestine, it appears, was mainly Jewish, and the commercial lifeblood of the region was concentrated in the Jewish communities in these towns, and that by 1800, Palestine had become a desert. Every passing year the land became more barren, deforestation increased and farmland turned to desert. Rather than being a desert, Palestine was a thriving Arab society about to enter the 20th century as a modern society. Myth Pound 2. The Jews were a people without a land. According to Shlomo Sand in his book The Invention of the Jewish People, the Christian world adopted the idea of the Jews as a nation that must one day return to the Holy Land to fulfill biblical prophecies about the second coming of Jesus and the end of time. Christian Zionism predated political Zionism, which turned it into a Jewish project. The Christian idea was to colonize Palestine and transform it into a Christian entity. Myth Pound 3. Zionism is Judaism. Zionism has been only one inessential expression of Jewish cultural life. According to Papp, it was born out of two impulses among Jewish communities in Central and Eastern Europe. The first was a search for safety within a society that refused to integrate Jews as equals, and that occasionally persecuted them. The second impulse was a wish to emulate other new national movements, mushrooming in Europe at the time, during what historians called the European Spring of Nations. Myth Pound 4. Zionism is not colonialism. By 1945, Zionism had attracted more than 500,000 settlers to a country that already had a population of about 2 million. The only way for settlers to expand their hold on the land and ensure an exclusive demographic majority was to remove the indigenous people from their homeland. Israel is a Zionist settler colony. Myth Pound 5. The Palestinians left their homeland voluntarily in 1948. The Israeli government, though, insists that Palestinians left their land as refugees because their leaders, and the leaders of the Arab world, told them to leave Palestine before the Arab armies invaded and kicked out the Jews, after which they could return. This is a myth invented by the Israeli Foreign Ministry. Moreover, the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians can in no way be justified as a punishment for their rejecting an peace plan that was devised without any consultation with the Palestinians themselves. Myth Pound 6. The June 1967 war was a war of no choice. The narrative accepted by Israel is that the 1967 war forced Israel to occupy the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, and keep it in custody until the Arab world, or the Palestinians, were willing to make peace with the self-styled Jewish state. Many believe that the 1967 war was one in which Israel resisted attack and occupied the West Bank, East Jerusalem and Gaza in self-defense. Myth Pound 7. Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. Until 1967, the Palestinians who were able to hold on to their homes and land in 1948 and became Israeli citizens represented 20% of the population, but were subjected to military rule based on draconian British mandatory emergency regulations that denied the Palestinians any basic human or civil rights, denying people the right of return to their homeland, and at the same time offering this right to others who have no connection to the land, is a model of undemocratic practice. Israel, apartheid state in which there is only Zionism, no democracy, no human rights, no free speech, no free elections, no right to live for Palestinians. Myth Pound 8. The Oslo Mythologies. On September 13, 1993, Israel and the Palestine Liberation Organization signed a Declaration of Principles, known as the Oslo Accords. We should acknowledge that the Oslo process was not a fair and equal pursuit of peace, but a compromise agreed to by a defeated, colonized people, notes Papp. As a result, the Palestinians were forced to seek solutions that went against their interests and endangered their very existence. The same argument can be made about the debates concerning the two-state solution that was offered in Oslo. Myth Pound 9. Gaza Mythologies. There are some myths that mislead public opinion about the causes of the ongoing violence in Gaza. Hamas is a terrorist movement. In fact, the Islamic resistance movement, known by its Arabic acronym Hamas, is a legitimate liberation movement, and it is one of the main actors on the ground. The other myth is Israel's claim that its actions since 2006 have all been part of a war of self-defense. There's that claim against terrorism. In fact, this war is part of the slow genocide of the Palestinians in Gaza, which has been happening for decades and has only recently become both very obvious and murderous in every way possible. Myth Pound 10. The two-state solution is the only way forward. In the 2000 Camp David talks, Israel proposed the establishment of a small Palestinian state, with Abu Dis as its capital, but without significant dismantling of its own illegal settlements, and no right of return for the refugees. Not surprisingly, the negotiations collapsed. Hence, the Oslo Accords have become a destructive factor for Palestinian society, instead of bringing peace. 10 myths since October 7, 23. Since Israel launched its genocidal campaign against Palestinians in Gaza, its Western propagandists have waged a battle of disinformation. As soon as Israeli forces began the round-the-clock carpet bombing of Gaza, on the 8th of October, prominent media outlets like the New York Times and the BBC went full throttle in waging a massive disinformation campaign to justify the horrors that would soon unfold. Western media carpet-bombed the news cycle with pro-Israel propaganda, and a narrative that would distract from the fact that Israel was engaged in a barbaric genocide of an entire people, and that the whole edifice of the presumptuous Western civilization and democracy was a big fat lie. 1. The conflict began on the 7th of October, following Palestinian fighters' attack on Israel. President Joe Biden declared that the 7th of October attack is equivalent to 15/9/11s for Israel, which Western outlets similarly argued it is not. However, before the 7th of October, there was the 6th of October, and before that was a succession of dates and facts in a murderous colonial project of domination and dispossession going back to the Nakba, or catastrophe, of 1948. The conflict began on the 7th of October. Before that was the racist Balfour Declaration of 1917, deliberately designed to get rid of European Jews, which was preceded by European misadventure into the heart of the Arab and Muslim world, and the rise of Zionism, as a settler colonial movement. And before that still was Christian Zionist zealotry, lobbying to force Jews back to Palestine, to expedite the coming of their Messiah. The conflict began on the 7th of October. While the Israeli government and its Zionist propagandists wish to fetishize the 7th of October, we are here to defetishize and historicize it. The succession of Zionist terrorist attacks on defenseless Palestinian civilians includes the massacres of Deir Yassin, 1948, Kafr Qasim, 1956, Khan Yunis, 1956, Sabra and Shatila, aided and abetted by Israel, 1982, and countless others. Israel was founded on the bloodshed and broken bones of Palestinians long before the 7th of October 2023. The world also continued after the 7th of October, when Israel commenced yet another genocidal attack on 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza. 2. Palestine is Hamas. Palestine is not. Israel and its U.S. and European accomplices have equated Hamas with the entirety of Palestine, to discredit their entire resistance and liberation struggles. Palestine is not Hamas. Palestine is its heroic people, its generations of scholars, historians, artists, novelists, playwrights, poets, filmmakers, scientists, physicians, engineers, revolutionary thinkers and activists. Israel and its American and European enablers are no match for Palestinians. 3. Hamas is ISIS. It is not. ISIS, or the Islamic State group, was a rootless, violent gang created and conditioned by the U.S. invasion of Iraq. Fortunately for Palestine, Palestinian fighters represent a deeply cultivated and historically conscious Palestinian population collectively resisting the Zionist thievery of their homeland. 4. The situation in Palestine is a humanitarian crisis. Another falsehood. Palestinian fighters are deeply rooted in the hearts and minds and aspirations of the Palestinian people. They did not fall from the sky. They do not hide among the population. They emerge from that population. They are their sons and daughters, husbands and wives, children and grandchildren. 5. Palestinian fighters hide among the civilian population. Another falsehood. Palestinian fighters are deeply rooted in the hearts and minds and aspirations of the Palestinian people. They did not fall from the sky. They do not hide among the population. They emerge from that population. They are their sons and daughters, husbands and wives, children and grandchildren. The assumption that they hide among the civilians is a barefaced racist assertion by those who believe Palestinians are not human beings. Israel faces the steely determination of a nation, not a collection of isolated guerrilla organizations. 6. Palestinian casualties are exaggerated and untrustworthy. This is the propaganda point of the New York Times and the Washington Post for Americans and BBC for Europeans, which formed the phrase, Hamas-controlled Gaza Health Ministry, as if the details of Israeli casualties are independently verified by the International Criminal Court. When the New York Times or BBC state the Hamas-controlled Gaza Health Ministry, we read the phrase back at them. The pro-Israel biased news outfits discredit Palestinian suffering. 7. The emergence of an Arab street inside the West. What does that even mean? They argue, the recent protests in European capitals, especially, are less an extension of a radicalized progressivism than a straightforward expression of ethnic and religious solidarity with the Palestinians on the part of Middle Eastern immigrants and their descendants. Despite racist assertions that only Middle Eastern immigrants are protesting, the millions of people standing in solidarity with Palestinians is not the Arab street. 8. The emergence of an Arab street inside the West. This is a racist xenophobic attempt to brand and alienate a whole new fact of citizenship in the US and Europe. Millions of people protesting against Israel and in solidarity with Palestinians is not the Arab street. These courageous demonstrators are Americans, British, Germans, French, Italian, etc., and they are there not to allow genocide in their name. And they are not only in the streets. They are on university campuses, in law firms, centers for research and scholarship, in factories and workshops, and of course, serve on editorial boards and in university administrations. 9. The radicalization of progressivism. Here they write, the extent to which the rhetoric of declinization turns out to naturally extend, from cultural and psychological projects to literal support for armed struggle, and tacit apology for anti-Semitic terror still feels like an important unveiling. This is a flawed and dangerous reading of the situation. The latest genocidal spectacle they have staged since the 8th of October, for the whole world to see more than ever proves that as a misbegotten European ideology of conquest and domination, Zionism is an unqualified failure, kept like a zombie in motion by a sick dysfunctional empire. 10. West is democratic and loves free speech. There is a long-standing misconception that West is a free democracy and values democracy for its own sake. No, West has always been xenophobic and fascist, otherwise there wouldn't be any colonization, slavery, Holocaust, destruction of Africa and Palestinian genocide. There would be no ban on critical theory, TikTok, and Al Jazeera. Yuval Noah Harari and Western hypocrisy. As for Hamas, it and its supporters should be excommunicated by humanity. Not only Israel, but the entire human community should place Hamas completely beyond its pale, just as it has previously done with ISIS. Israeli citizens cannot live in places like Kfar Aza with Hamas across the fence, just as Iraqi and Syrian citizens could not live with ISIS on their doorstep. Yuval Noah Harari and Western hypocrisy. Tens of thousands of Israeli civilians have already fled the border areas, and they cannot go back to their homes until the threat to their lives is removed. At a deeper level, the lives of all humans are devalued and endangered as long as organizations like Hamas and ISIS are allowed to exist. Truth. Harari's views represent Israel's state policy. With all his talk of free thinking and reason, he makes no sense when he talks on Palestine, and it is very disappointing. Elon Musk and Western hypocrisy. West is making axiomatic error by considering the weak right. It means that one should not sympathize with Palestinians as victims of genocide and should not condemn Israel as perpetrator of war crimes, implying weak can be criminal and oppressor can be benevolent. Muhammad Ali Jinnah's views on Palestine and question of recognizing Israel. The Palestinian issue was a matter of great concern for Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the founder of the Islamic State of Pakistan. Considering its status as first Qibla, he particularly played a crucial role in creating awareness on the issue. Under the stern leadership of Jinnah, the Palestinian issue gained an increased impetus on international forums. He supported the Arab cause throughout his political career, and maintained cordial relations with Palestinian leadership. His composed leadership enabled All India Muslim League to support each and every resolution on Palestinians' turmoil, and guaranteed its utmost assistance. Jinnah said Jinnah not only supported cause of Palestinians and reiterated that the policy of the British government towards the Arabs in Palestine has wounded deeply Muslim feelings, and sentiments and all representations on that behalf have had no real effect so far. May I now turn not only and refer to the question of Palestine? It has moved the Malmans all over India most deeply. The whole policy of the British government has been a betrayal of the Arabs, from its very inception. Fullest advantage has been taken of their trusting nature. Great Britain has dishonored her proclamation to the Arabs, which had guaranteed them complete independence for the Arab homelands, and the formation of an Arab confederation, under the stress of the Great War. The Muslims of India will stand solid and will help the Arabs in every way they can in the brave and just struggle that they are carrying on against all odds. Jinnah also announced the 10th of May as Palestine Day, to remark solidarity with the Arab brethren. 6-3. Jinnah and Palestine came to know the decision to divide Palestine against all efforts and aspirations of the Arabs. He endeavored to convince the American President Harry S. Truman via a cable message. Jinnah made appeal to think about rights of the Palestinians, and tried to convey pitfalls of Partition 8, but the time had gone for such diplomatic efforts, as the U.S. got 33 votes in favor of the partition plan. Pakistan was one of those states which cast their vote against this scheme. This was a shock for Jinnah and his trust over the United Nations, which had been lacking impartial verdict. Jinnah termed the decision for partition as unjust and cruel, as it had overruled all aspects of humanity. Jinnah pledged to help cause of the Arabs in Palestine in every possible way. 8-4. In the coming days, Pakistan opposed Israel's creation in every possible way. On matter of Israel's inclusion into the United Nations, Pakistan put its vote against Israel due to its immoral and illegitimate origin. Even the Constituent Assembly of Pakistan passed unanimous resolution emphatically not to recognize the State of Israel.